Hey everyone, welcome back. This episode sponsored by my amazing patrons on patreon.com/redhillsrancher. I have a don't miss episode for you this week. As with most of these, I saw something that caught my eye on social media. Messages were exchanged and a date was arranged. This time though, doing something I haven't done in a long time. My new friends, Hunter and River from Smooth Ag, wanted to come up and see the ranch, check out my cows, and then hit the studio for a little podcast. So you know the deal. We got to take care of a little business first, and then on to the episode. This episode is brought to you by C90 Ocean Minerals, the first step in regenerative agriculture. C90 offers a complete spectrum of natural minerals and trace elements that feed soil biology, enzymes, and fungi to regenerate your soil matrix and improve soil fertility. Soil with improved microbiology and mineral nutrition will grow protein-packed and nutrient-rich pastures that your animals will thrive on. Plus, our premium mineral salt offers 5 times the valuable minerals and trace elements versus leading competitors. Give us a call at 717-580-1458 and our experts will develop a custom program that fits your operation. Or visit our website to order smaller quantities, including for your garden. Visit c-90.com and use the promo code REBOOT to save $5 today. That's 717-580-1458 or c90.com with the promo code REBOOT. Once again, that's sea-90.com, promo code REBOOT. Hey there, Ranching Reboot listeners. Do you want to support our mission of promoting regenerative agriculture and telling the stories of those who are changing the food system for the better? Then consider joining our Patreon community and becoming a patron today. By becoming a patron, you'll get access to exclusive bonus content, merch rewards, and more. Your support will help us continue to bring you fresh stories from some of today's most innovative and progressive farmers, ranchers, and other producers of food. And don't forget to join our Discord server, where you can connect with other fans, discuss current events and past podcast episodes, and get exclusive updates on what we're working on behind the scenes. Our Discord community is the perfect place to share your thoughts and ideas, get feedback on your ranching projects, and learn from other experts in the field. Whether you're a rancher, farmer, or just someone who cares about where your food comes from, you'll find a welcoming community of like-minded individuals on our Discord server. So join our Patreon community and our Discord server today, and let's keep rebooting your thinking about farming, ranching, food systems, and the people that operate them. Ranching Reboot is your favorite regenerative ag podcast, and we can't wait to continue bringing you valuable content with your support.
Yo, what's good, my homies? It's your boy Red Hills, and I'm here to tell you about these Bobolink beef snacks. Let me tell you, they straight fire, you dig? I'm talking about real high-quality beef, seasoned to perfection and slow-cooked to give you that melt-in-your-mouth taste. And let's not forget about the packaging. It's tight, it's fresh, and it's perfect for on-the-go snacking. Now, I know what y'all might be thinking. Red, ain't no beef snack going to be good enough for me, but trust me, these Bobolink beef snacks are straight-up game changers. I'm talking about that real beef flavor, packed with protein and made with all-natural ingredients. So if you want to elevate your snack game, snack like a boss, then you got to try these Bobolink beef snacks. I'm telling you, they're the real deal. And don't take my word for it. Try them out yourself, and you'll see why I'm hooked. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. Peace out and stay snacking, my homies. My name's Red Hills Rancher, and I'm the steward of the Red Hills. And if you didn't know, you do now. Bow wow.
Hey, you want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money. All in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify, and when you want to take your conversations with fans to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best way to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. Best of all, it's totally free with no catch. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today. Well, hey, everybody, welcome back. We are here today in the Eastus Media Studio, sponsored by Legends Pub and Grill. If you're ever in Pratt, Kansas, looking for a great meal, stop by Legends Pub and Grill. Owned and operated by my good friend Cody Eastus, who also is letting me use this great studio today. So we're back in the studio in Pratt today, joined by my good friend Brendon again, and joined by River and Hunter from an outfit called Smooth Ag. So just so I don't mess this up, gentlemen, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Smooth Ag is and what it does, and we can kind of kick off from there.
Yeah, you bet. So Smooth Ag is primarily a technology company, but rooted in the ranching industry. We build and deliver a robotic device of larger scale, a vehicle that is aimed specifically at feeding cows, mainly pasture land at the moment, and we're working on future developments to get into more feedlot type settings as well. So yeah, that's what we do, and I'll let Hunter extrapolate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely great, place to start with who we are. Fundamentally, we just saw there's an issue in terms of innovation in the agricultural landscape, and whether we like it or not, there is a dichotomy between row crop farmers and cattle ranchers, and it seemed that most of the innovations and investments have been were predominantly focused at crop production. So we're kind of doing things the same way that we've been doing since the 60s and 70s, fundamentally speaking, feeding out of something like a trip hopper or, on a pickup feeder for your supplement feeding. And that hasn't really changed. I think River was just driving, and this is how it really played out, as he saw that that's the same thing. We have this technology that's available and readily usable to make it fully autonomous. Is just orchestrating all those pieces. And when I met River, he had put the pieces together, and then we started deciding to go down the route of building, an enterprise out of this, and started to really visualize what the Ranch Rover could actually be. And we kind of call it the Rover-centric model, where this really can be a platform for managing your ranch in totality, with autonomy, and also augment your capabilities. So I think to kind of segue into that, right, it's really important to understand what River and I's goal was, when it came to putting this together. River, I think, you put this together. I mean, really talk about, how you felt about it.
Yeah, so the original story is that I graduated college and then I came home. I worked for about a year after college in the industry that graduate the degree related to the degree that I got, which was construction. I worked in the HVAC industry, and I did that for about a year, and decided that I didn't really like living in the city anymore. So I originally went back to the ranch to just to kind of reset and realign myself. And I was really just planning on staying for 2 or 3 months till the money ran out, basically. And in that time, find a new job, probably in construction, somewhere else. In that time, though, I was feeding, and it was like, man, I'm really big on efficiency, right? I'm a very logical person. I'm a problem solver. So efficiency is huge to me, and so it just grinds my gears whenever I do something mundane. Like if something that's just being done that really doesn't take a whole lot of thinking, I can't handle it, right? So I was just feeding one day, and literally was just like, there's got to be a better way to do this. Like there has to be somebody's already got it, like an autonomy. Like there's already got to be a robot for this. Like somebody's already doing it. I need to go find it for myself, right? We just need to go buy this thing because this is ridiculous. Okay, I don't need to be here every time. That's the cold hard facts. At least for our operation, I would argue for most, is I do not need to be here every time that I feed, right? And so I went to looking, and there was nothing. We got nothing. We don't have any systems for it in the pasture land. We don't even have anything built up, right? We don't even have anything on a rail, okay? And it got me thinking. I was like, to me, it's absurd, right? Because I know enough about technology to know that all these technologies are here. Just nobody's packaged them together. And like, are you serious? And I did a thorough search, and still today I do searches, and nobody's doing this, right? And so it's like that weird that, like, once you figure out what your purpose is, it's like you just kind of get latched onto this idea, and you're just absorbed by it. And needless to say, I have not found another job since that idea entered my mind. I went ahead and stayed on the ranch where expenses are low, and I was allowed the time to learn and start to put these pieces together in a preliminary fashion until I could learn enough. And I saved my money until I learned enough, and we started putting the the first conceptual model together. And at that time, first conceptual model is really what kind of sparked, people's involvement. Like that's when Hunter came on. He saw that just building that first thing. You had to build it to like prove to people, hey, this is possible, right? And from then on, it's just been, it's like the snowball. It took a little while to build the snowball on top of the hill and then get it rolling and get it rolling and get it rolling. Now I think we're coming over the edge of that hill, and that snowball is starting to pick up momentum on its own, right? And it took a lot of work to get here, right? But so yeah, that's how this all built up to this where we are right now. And then from there, right, just on top of this feeding thing, we've built out all these methodologies and these ideas around it, but we've learned that there's so much more to it than just feeding, right? Like we're doing
that guy's a little loud.
Yeah, that's all right. It just adds to the authenticity of, where we are. I'm pretty sure that was a grain truck, and I also think that's a cattle truck driving by as well right now. So yeah, it's good.
Maybe I should have had you sit with your back to the window.
But it's like to get back on track there. There's feeding, and that's what Rover-centric even comes from, right? It's like we need to solve a real problem, and that's a real problem. Like labor and feeding and solving a mundane task, that's a real problem that could really help ranchers, right? And then we have this, but then we've learned, and Hunter can extrapolate. He's really good at extrapolating a lot more on this front. Is all the value that we can piggyback now that off of this platform, now that it's in the pasture, now that we're there, we just opened up this realm of possibility that wasn't there before. Right, like as far as automated data collection, there's been a lot of. Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to let's put a picture in our listeners' minds of what we're talking about here.
Gotcha. Yeah,
it's basically a flatbed with 2 axles under it and a cake box on its back.
That's right. Yeah,
and that's it. No cab, nothing. It just looks like a flatbed with a cake box out there cruising around the pasture.
Right.
Video cameras, sensors. But yeah, for the most part, it's very basic. It's made of steel, right? I mean, we're thinking about our use case, and yeah, it's a pretty robust machine in terms of how capable it is. But at the same time, it is basic, right? It's like you just said, it's really just a flatbed. It's,
it needs to be something that a farmer can fix with a crescent wrench and a pair of fence pliers.
Precisely that.
I mean, if you have to plug in a laptop to it, it's
you've gone too far.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what, simplicity is built in complexity, and we keep all that under the hood, right? But as far as ever having to, let's say a computer box breaks down, you get into that, well, it's just, the model is send you another box and plug it in, okay, right? Mm-hmm. That's the, we're not trying to build rockets over here, right? We're just trying to build something that this technology has been around for a long time, and now we're just packaging it together and building it for this particular solution and building the user interfaces for it as well, right? And but yeah, I didn't even think about the fact that we need to explain what this is and draw the picture for people because this is a podcast. So,
I mean, it's an audio format.
Yeah, it's an audio format, right? And maybe we could throw up a video or something with it, a link or something in some way, form, or fashion. We can direct people towards that so they can get a better idea. But vehicle that feeds cows, right? Flatbed feeds cows, just like you said, platform, 4 wheels, 4-wheel drive. If your pickup can go through it or drive it, the Rover can drive it, right? But to get back on to it's, the value side, that piggybacking of all these other things, I think we're going to cover this feeding thing, the 3 aspects of the automated feeding is going to take just a short amount of time. And I think that you're going to start asking a lot more questions about everything that can revolve around this now that it's out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you start to dissect this and you see that feeding, yes, very important. One, you're subconsciously training the cattle by providing consistency that no human can provide just through that regimented time clock. Sometimes you wake up a little late. Sometimes the truck doesn't crank over the first time, right? That all affects your schedule. And,
sometimes the wife wants to snuggle a little bit extra in bed that morning.
Absolutely, right? So I think you think about those things. Well, sorry, you're not going to train your cattle to the consistency that a machine that, gets up, it doesn't even get up. Let's just be frank about that. It starts up and does its job. And that allows us to be consistent with the cattle. They know what the machine's there for. They respect it. They're excited to see it, right? It's the grain buggy, and it knows those cows, when they hear that sound of the machine start up, they're excited.
It's a candy wagon.
Yes, sir.
And I noticed you guys like trip hoppers on your Rover, and that's fine. I don't have anything like specifically against trip hoppers. Yeah. I will say, we're talking about consistency in training cows. Just the noise that a trip hopper makes, to me, that loud bang and clang.
Yeah, the click.
I get why. The last feeders that I've used, and the feeders that I would use if I was going back to feeding like a cube or a pellet type product, an old bar 6, and it's got an auger screw, but it's geared down, so it's a double reduction, so that it actually runs pretty slow. And they're fairly quiet, and the only noise was really the cake falling off the chute. It didn't have that loud, the loud banging of the door. That's just something, and maybe it's a personal preference.
Is that an ecological concern for you?
No, but it's a
behavioral
issue. Let's be honest, it's a behavioral issue, because whether you're bringing out your cubes with a Range Rover or a pickup, whether it's a geared feeder that's quiet or a trip hopper, you're the crack dealer.
Correct.
Right? I mean, you are the drug dealer, and no matter what you're in, they're eventually going to get used to you and come to you. There is a huge value in consistency. Don't get me wrong. And I can speak to that from when we strip grazed a few years ago, and I was running the bat latches and all the polywire. We'd go out twice a week and build all the fences for the week. And every day at 2:00, that's when my bat latches were set to open. And it kind of got to be a game. Like if I was close and it was 155, I would run over there and and set like a half a mile away and just watch and listen. And when that gate opened, I promise you, by the end of the season, after doing it 100 times, when that gate opened, in less than 2 minutes, 100 cows would be on the other side of it. They get used to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
So what are you trying to explain about behavior in the loud flapping? What is what's the behavior that you're expecting, or what's the behavior you're trying to avoid with that? Like, what are you trying to?
I don't want them running to the cake truck.
Okay.
I don't want them running from a half a mile away on the other side of the pasture and leaving their calf by that sagebrush and running across the pasture.
It will act like a call.
Yeah.
But you want them all there
Yeah.
when you start feeding.
I think you're going to do that. I think you're doing that no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything that you do consistently, right? And like, okay, what is the exchange, right? I think, just give me 1 sec, because I think I'm trying to understand where you're at. And for me, yeah, you don't want them running across the pasture, but is that trade-off with them running across when you're using the machine to go out there? That one time, what is the effect aside from having them be excited for that? So when it's time to move 100 cows, you have a pretty simple solution to move 100 cows very simply on your own.
Oh, I'm with you, and I get where you're at. It's just, I think we have to be careful with using some of these systems that put negative behavior traits in our cows that we're not actively trying to suppress. Does that make sense? Like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with them getting excited and running across the pasture too. You can use that energy in a different context to do something good, to do a management objective that you want to get them to move to a different pasture. But then on the other, the flip side of that coin is you're going to get them wired to that certain sound. And maybe you're not the only person in the environment that brings that sound near your cows.
Yeah, that's fair.
A lot of guys like to, when they feed, they like to call with a siren.
Yeah.
Which is great. I have a siren on my gator, and I use it as a call. But you know how many times I've seen a fire truck go down the highway, blowing a siren, and all the cows for 20 miles along the highway go run to the fence because they think that somebody's showing up there in a feed truck. There's trade-offs to everything we do with livestock. Everything's a give and take. I guess that's all I'm saying.
I think to wrap this up and to kind of put a nix in that worry is, like, if that is something you're worried about, we have designed the computers and the inputs and outputs to accommodate for most feeders, even scales. Okay. So I think I think at the end of the day, that's going to be customer preference, because we have to do that, right? Because not everybody's going to want to buy a unit and pay for the feeder that comes on it. The feeder comes on, it's 4,000 pounds in the production model. They may just want to go ahead and just put their 2,000 pound or 1,500 pound model on it. We can't be like, no, we can't do that.
And let's not escape I think what we really started talking about was, these accessories or, planetary objects in our solar system, right? Rover-centric eludes that we're kind of the sun that makes this all possible. When we look at the technology landscape for cattle right now, it's highly fragmented, mostly in functionality, right? Because a rancher's job is just so dynamic. I think that's what's really hard for these big tech people to understand, that there are people out here that are the plumber, the electrician, the nutritionist, the carpenter, the welder, and the list goes on. I can go forever, right?
But the bookkeeper, the networking technician, the list of jobs is endless.
Right. So how can we take some work off their shoulders? Well, it's definitely not giving you 30 pieces of software to independently use, right?
Hey, Hunter, maybe explain like what some of those, like some examples of what those other softwares could be for.
Yeah,
a lot of people may not even know that there's stuff like vents and wireless ear tags, and like they may not know what we're talking about. We want
to get into vents and wireless ear tags. That's a whole other can.
Yeah, but that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah,
it's like being like, everything kind of revolves around the thing that does the main job, which is right now it's just feeding. I mean, like that's the most valuable thing right now, simply put, right now as far as labor goes, and now we're going to have, and we're entering the market, and Vince is there, and you got wireless ear tags, and there's a bunch of those
water sensors
and this, and there's a ton of these things, and we're all using a different app for each one of them.
Cattle management software. I mean, it's all the list.
And so that's what Hunter, and I just wanted to point that out, that's what Hunter means by fragmented. That's what he means by that. So go ahead, Hunter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So I think now you take that understanding of the ecosystem. What's missing there is really someone to take your place for the uptake of that data, and in order to like synthesize it into something a little bit more simple, right? You can do it, right? You can have all 30 of those apps, but it takes an extreme amount of time to dedicate to all these different systems, recording the numbers and keeping plots of that. So you're just changing the rancher's job to be more in the office, when in reality, like most of the other jobs that they do are outside. So where are we getting this opportunity to spend time doing data entry when you're supposed to be this guy that welds and does all of this, everything, right? You don't have time to be doing data entry as well. They're just kind of adding to the scope of work. Where the Rover, let's shift this, right? Feeding, high value, right? I think that we found the most time there. Like when you look at your day-to-day on the ranch, like in consistency, it's like checking cattle, driving out there. It's not even looking at the cattle. It's mostly just driving to the cattle is what takes the time. And then you look at them and then you go, right? And you drive back through everything you've seen already, right?
All 53 gates that you had to go through to get where the cows are at. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you understand, right, that there's all of this time that was spent. And that's why I think River says it's like so high value for the feeder, because, okay, look, that's that drive time that honestly we consider it kind of the low hanging fruit of jobs in terms of like computation skills, right? Driving it on 2-track road with the current technology that we have, easy.
It's not like you're trying to blast a Tesla down the California freeway with millions of other lunatics at 80 miles an hour. You're trying to navigate down a 2-track road at 4.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
I imagine that's a technological problem several orders of magnitude easier to solve than Tesla's driving cars.
So that means we can put a lot more focus into providing this data interface, right? And I think what also Hunter's trying to explain is, all these technologies are built to save ranchers time, and then at the end of the day, they don't. And what we're trying to do with this, because we're solving a high value problem, which has a direct correlation with opportunity cost, right? Like if you're not feeding that day, the 3 or 4 hours it takes you to do that, that's 3 or 4 hours you can spend on a dozer. That's okay. I'll put it this way: driving the feed truck is $7.25 an hour work. Changed my mind. All right, it is. That's what it is. Now that might not what you can. That you may not be getting anybody else to take that, but that's what it is.
That's what it's worth.
It's not. Yeah, it's what it's worth. And it's so if you're not having to spend the 3 or 4 hours doing that, you can spend that 3 or 4 hours in the dozer that you have rented, like you were saying, or the excavator that you had, and that's $40 to $50 an hour work on your time. What you're accomplishing there, right? And so yeah, we don't. So, but if we create another technology, if we're back in the office, we just make it easier. Like we're not here to make your job easier, or make your job, to save enough to move time around into more valuable places. And that's our big. And I think that's like our main focus.
Yeah,
there.
we've seen that, right? Like where people say, "Oh, you got to be a lazy person to buy one of those." No. I'm extremely busy. I don't want to drive the feed truck. Checking the cattle, well, fortunately for us, we can sync up with the video feed on the machine and do our job if we feel so, inclined to do. But I was just there yesterday working on something in that pasture. I saw those cows. I think I can go another day without, losing sleep. Another thing that we get all the time is, well, what about the sick ones? If you have that many sick cattle that every time you go out there, you're doctoring something, we need to maybe look at the animal health side of your ranch. And maybe that like automation technology isn't for you until you've got a better string. And that is something that is really hard for people to understand, that when it comes down to it, this is a business. This is a tool for business people to use to their pleasure and their benefit, right? When I say pleasure, because people want to go to their kids' football game, or right now it's Texas State track meet for high school. Well, it's calving season. So I can afford a day if I'm allowed to watch the video and I see that something's not looking good, I'll make that drive home, Yeah. But that's kind of the thing, right? You got to start looking at it from what is my time truly worth? And there's somebody that will go check my cows for less than $10,000 a year, and I can connect my EID wand and receiver, and now I'm starting to do things, autonomously. We're starting to do things without working. I don't know if it's culture or what it is, but it's really cool to be a hard worker, but it's much cooler to be a smart worker. And I think that the Rover shuns away people that want to be so rugged in their tradition.
I think it's even cooler to have quality time with your family and not be married to the ranch all the time. Like a lot of us grew up watching our mentors and watching people in our lives. You don't have this mentality that if you're not working 20 hours a day, you're lazy. I mean, you just don't stop. And if you're not making enough money, you just go work harder. Like that's the solution. You just go work harder, just go put in more hours. And my friend Dallas Mount has a great quote. He says, "There's no use hitting bullseyes if you're aiming at the wrong target." And I think a lot of us, whether it was from upbringing, environment, our parents, or in college, we were told to aim at the wrong bullseyes. Like we were just given the wrong target picture from the beginning. We're not even sure what we're supposed to be doing. And, that quality time with the family. I mean, yeah, cows are important. Keeping cows fed, keeping your calves alive. Yeah, that's important. You know what? That calf isn't going to remember that you didn't check them twice a day. Your kid's damn sure going to remember all the track meets and school dances that you missed.
Yeah. Well, even if you were there physically, maybe you weren't there mentally. They remember that too, and I'll speak a little bit more on what Hunter was saying. Even if some people right at this point might get the impression that we just nobody's ever going to check them. You're always going to look at the video. And I don't think, and that's not true. Look, if you feed 4 times a week and it takes you 3 hours each time, if you just go feed once I'll get to that. You still wouldn't actually go be the one driving the feeder. But if you show up to those one time, you're still saving like 9 hours a week, the 3 days that you're not there, right? Like that's still a huge savings compared to what you were doing. And trust, cow-calf operation, like Hunter was saying, if you're having that many sick ones, that you need to be there every time. But without that, like if you don't have that situation, you only need to be there about once a week. From about 95% of the producers that I talk to, that's the way they respond. And so, and then I'll put it this way too. There's a lot of save time in that consistency and that schedule and getting the cows in that organized, that herd routine is what I call it. You get them in that herd routine, right? And you can just drive, 20 miles an hour down your ranch road, or 40 in my case. It just depends on how much you care about your equipment. And you can just drive to your feed location because you know exactly when it's going to be there and, where it's going to be and what time it's going to be there. You just get there fast at that time. You just meet it there. Do your checking, do your driving through, or bring your horse like we were talking about earlier. And this one comes up all the time. You want to ride your horse through them? You want to ride through them? That's fine. Drive it out there, unload it, and ride through them as they come up to it. They're going to be in sync with that thing. They're not even going to be paying attention to you as they do right now. They're going to get feed. You're going to have a better chance at some calf or something that you need a doctor. If you need a freaking sling one over his head, you just drive up on him and get it done. Right?
That's a great point right there. That and that kind of back to my commentary earlier when I was talking about consistency or when I was talking about the noise and the stimulus. Okay, maybe that's the good side of it. Maybe the Range Rover is making the noise. The little gas motor's making its noise. The hydraulics from driving it are whining. The trip hopper's doing its banging, clanging thing. Okay, so that's the noise they're used to every single day or every other day when they're getting fed. And they're going to be paying attention to that. And they're going to have their heads down on that line of cake that thing dropped. And they're not going to pay attention to you sneaking up behind in your side-by-side or on your horse to get your count or to rope out that sick calf. And I can see that.
Yeah. I think it takes a little bit of creativity, but once you start to kind of open your mind and relinquish all of the negativity when you're looking at this, right? It's really easy to look at new things and try to find every problem. But if we shift our focus towards something a little bit more positive and start to say, all right, how can I use this? We found it even more beneficial for ourselves, right? Like developing the product and our vision for the future really came down to us changing like what we thought was wrong with the Rover and think about what it could be, right? And that's where we started to develop this, Rover-centric model is when we started like being selfless and thinking about how can we help the EID companies, get more cat data readings and how can we get things more automated on the software side? Well, you're going to have a receiver that's able to read the EID. You have to get close enough, right? So, well, the Rover can do that. When we're going down the feed line, the cows are right there and I can just do a U-turn. And if I miss something, the Rover's going to go back through until it's complete. Let's say a cow's missing. Now you don't have to drive home to go get a horse and try to go play looking for the cow. You're at home.
And with your system, you get dual verification. The system would come up and say, I only found 119 out of 120 cows. Mm-hmm. And then it would come up with a list of who's missing by EID. Do the EID roll call.
So now you're already at home. So now you're just going out one time to go find the cow, and then you can go home. You're not doing this back and forth game. Growing up, that is where the real time waste is. When you're working on something, you're building a new set of pins, going home over and over and over again. It's worse than running to town too. Then that really creates another problem. But if you're watching your assets through video and you're able to see the ranch just like you can with your eyes, but you're also the Rover is pretty cool, like object detection. It can also find like kind of trash objects. If something blows up against the fence, you're going to get a notification. You're going to see that, And now you're kind of just starting to do things more automated, but you're in this centralized location where you can manage things that you see come across instead of like having to do this back and forth. You're doing one trip now. So
I'm about to throw you under the bus. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
So when are you going to have this thing to where it'll tell me that there's coyotes out amongst my calves?
Phone call.
Okay.
Yeah,
no. It's no. I'm serious. Yeah, that machine vision model that computer vision model is probably already built.
There's somebody else that's been listening to this that's had that thought. Like, if this thing's out there and it's got a camera on it, why can't it tell me when there's a coyote near my calves?
Yeah, that'll just be an integration in the software that's currently there.
Yeah, and if you really want to take it,
if you want to take it like you want to get real technical about it, it's really not that much.
Oh, talk nerdy to me, baby.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't need to. That's just the thing. Is like most of these models are already built. As far for pretty much every animal, there's a model built, and most of those are very in essence, easy to get your hands on, so to say.
Yeah, it's just a rich database of pictures, right? And we've just like, in the conjunction with machine learning and humans on the other side doing validation, we're being able to like master these, multi-million picture data sets. Humans give it information, right? And say, these are coyotes, these are coyotes, these are coyotes. Just like those, like, click all the pictures with buses. Mm-hmm. So you're helping validate. And then the machine starts to pick up what's going on, and then it's able to remove the necessity for a human to start validating, and the machine goes on its own.
And that's what Hunter's saying. Whenever your verification thing, where you are checking those boxes, like pick the motorcycle. That data actually goes back to some computer vision database.
Yeah, they're not actually checking to see if you're a human or not. Well,
They
they
are.
are because the computer can't.
But they're also piggybacking some value off of that process.
They're working for free.
Yeah, you're doing their job. You're help training their AI by telling it which pictures are what in the little 3 by 3 grid. So let's not make any mistake about that. That's definitely a two-way street.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So now we know, right? For the sanctity of our platforms, we have to do a little work. Nothing's free. But the Rover-centric model really takes all the technology and takes all of these platforms for ranchers and, really gives them an opportunity to connect in a way that probably wasn't going to be possible without fundamentally rethinking how we get out to the ranch, right? Ford is not going to be, they serve such a large market. They do not care about rancher pickup truck. Chevrolet, no one's trying to do that. They don't care.
It's been obvious since the 80s that they don't build pickups for people that actually work in pickups.
Right. Yeah. It's the site foreman for the construction company in the inner city. Right. So let's kind of dial that back and let's really focus on this Rover-centric idea. It's not so much that we are the end all be all, but we can facilitate this and we're happy to. River and I I was told this by a really smart, big time banker, and we're looking for money. And he's kind of like, okay, guys, you want to move fast. Don't walk in the footsteps of giants. If there's technology that's available and there are people doing things that you want to do, talk to them, figure out, is this really worth spending that 10,000 hours like we talked about? Or is it better to join forces so we can actually deliver results? And it's clearer than ever that we don't want to build water sensors. That's not our job. And if you want to make the smart ranch of the future for the people of today, we're going to need to work with those people instead of try to do what they're doing. Why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, I agree totally. And, we're sitting here having this conversation. Hunter, you and I spoke at length, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. And I roll things around in my head. And without getting into other brand names other than ones you mentioned. So we've got vents. We've got vents and a couple other kinds of, let's just call them collars, movement control collars. There's also several outfits out there that have a smart ear tag.
Yep.
That's kind of like a Fitbit for cows, not necessarily to control where they're at or give them any kind of signals, whether they're excluded from an area or what, but just to give you
Health
a
data.
location and health data back. And the issue, so with vents, they have a base station tower,
Right.
That their base station communicates through the cellular network with the rest of the world and the internet, the cloud, and the tower communicates on a different kind of network with all the callers to get the information of the callers, just because frequencies and whatnot. We talked about putting EID tags in cows. And I'm a believer in EID tags just for my record keeping. And those that listen to the podcast know that I am not for, I do not want mandatory traceability. I do not want mandatory EID. When they make it mandatory, I'll cut them all out. I'm that guy. I like the EIDs because that simplifies my record keeping. That makes keeping a weight record, keeping birth records, keeping a lot of those records is so much easier, and they're accurate with the EID and a digital system, right? The problem with EIDs is you got to get pretty close to read them, and there's a very limited amount of information. But they're also kind of cheap. So what I'm getting at is, let me finish. I'm going somewhere with this. So instead of having all of these different pieces of technology, whether we're talking about like a water sensor in a tank, I think you and I talked about one that was like on a short range RF signal or like maybe even a long range Bluetooth, just a sensor that was cheap, that stayed in proximity to the rover, and you just threw that in a tank and it gave you a level. Well, that doesn't have to have its own app to report back, because that's going to report back through your Ranger-centric model. You could have like a module on a fence to tell you the voltage of your fence. If you know how much water's in your tank, know how much voltage is in your fence, and you know how many cows are in the pasture, like that saves me a trip. Like because I imagine there's a lot of guys, okay, for 6 months out of the year, I don't need a cake box. We don't feed. Like, so then what do I do with this piece of technology over the 6 months when the cattle are primarily on grass and we're not supplementing? What's the use case then?
Well, you have it.
You still use it because you still want to go 1 day a week, year round.
Pull that sucker right up to your face, man. Speak up. Get in here. Join the conversation.
We'll edit that. I'm just watching and learning. But the summertime, 6 months you're talking about when you're on range, that's your 1 day a week trips. Wintertime will be your supplement trips, which will be every other day, every third day. So you're never not going to use it once you got it.
Now, as sensory progresses and we get our machine vision down tight and we're able to start measuring grass growth, then we're talking like, why not just have it drive all the time? Just collect data. I want you to go out here, and so that way when your kid inherits the ranch, right, you're able to not only give them this epic story from your own word of mouth, but a treasure trove of data that helps them understand how long these periods of drought can last, like, 5 years, 10 years in some cases, before we have what is considered normal for our area. And you're able to, show that data quantifiably. What's the temperature in a bad winter? What's the propensity for precipitation in September? You cannot accurately do that on your own. You need some help. And being able to have that data readily available for the next generation, all of a sudden, you know what you're getting yourself into. And I think let's kind of on that same function. I really like to look at small family ranches where somebody's working too outside of the ranch, bringing home an income. That's dying, right? Because this is a hard business and you wear all those hats. So your bandwidth is limited, but if you don't come up with some sort of salary, your kids don't have health insurance. You're in a tough spot, right? So you're kind of in this crazy place where you're forced to get a job outside of the ranch to make ends meet, but then you don't have that time. So what do you think goes first? The infrastructure. And then everything starts to fall apart really quickly. If we would focus on infrastructure when you're kind of doing this, two hat kind of dance, and you can spend more time working on projects instead of keeping your cattle in great shape and keeping them in line, now you have a kind of a fighting chance. What happens, I think, is the pens fall apart. Everything starts falling apart on you, and then it's unaffordable. You can't even work your cattle without having a horrible time.
Yeah, and I'm gonna and everything Hunter's correct. Hunter said is correct, and I'm gonna push back. I'm gonna go back to your argument against RFIDs becoming mandatory. Whether they become legally mandatory or not, I think you're always going to be. It will become mandatory for you to do it, because the market says so. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that, you're eventually going to get to the point where there's so much data is available or can be available on your place, on multiple places, that performance like scores can be assigned to your operation, and buyers can use that. And once we get to that point,
and they'll use it against you.
And they'll use it against you, and they'll use it for you. And capitalism is gonna and
show me the money, right?
Yeah. Show me the money, right? Yeah. It's not gonna take a government to do that. It's just now that it's here, and now that data is being collected, I don't know if it's gonna be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years. We're eventually gonna end up in that spot where it's like, now you kind of got to have a Ranch Rover, because you got to be able to, not necessarily a Ranch Rover, but you got to have these technologies in place now to collect this data to showcase.
Okay, well, I always like to use this dichotomy, River, about the evil corporate ag, because if it wasn't me and River, eventually this technology is going to be a necessity for major corporations to operate at a high level, right? They're not gonna want to pay people. They're gonna want this as automated and as high profit as possible.
Oh, I can see these things in feed yards in 5 years.
Yeah, it's not like that. It's an easy leap for us to go there, right? So once this starts happening, right, who's your master? And I think River and I, we don't want to be like Johnny Appleseed folk heroes, but honestly, there's a need for that in the space, right? We need to look at our tool as a tool to help the smaller rancher, not for the sake of getting profit for our shareholders, because we're not even there. We're new, we're fresh, we're young, and we have a passion for, operating properly. And yeah, we're not here to pay out dividends to anyone else. So I think our motives are way different, and who we align ourselves with, right? It's a way different landscape, right? We're able to make decisions where farmer and ranchers' data is safe, right? You don't have to worry about the scores being used against you politically, right? Because what happens when you let these big corporations come in, now they have a political need. They have to gain stuff at a high level, right? Like you said, the ecological impact that these large companies have is so vast and so much more detrimental than what we could ever do on our own, right? So we want to partner with producers and be as close to them as possible. And with traceability, that it's going to happen, right? That it's inevitable for quality control, right? If you produce prime beef, we want to keep you on our roster.
And we want to know how you're doing it, and we want a reputation to go off of to continue that cycle, right? We want to keep everybody accountable there. And I think that wasn't my point to say that you're going to be forcing this because of us. I think to go on what Hunter's saying and like being on the rancher side, being young, like the way we are is, it's either going to be us or them. That's a simple way to put it. It's either going to be us or somebody in that corporate vicinity that Hunter's talking about that does want to get there and eventually use it for major leverage in ways that probably aren't with the rancher's mind and with the rancher's interest.
As long as I don't have to eat bugs.
Right. Right.
You don't. Well, I think, what is it like a 1% of like peanut butter has a bug in it or something? You just.
I think there's like allowable percentage of rat in pork sausage too. Anyway, sensors. I wrote down like sensors because you guys are talking about, okay, we've got machine vision on this thing. You kind of brought up, photo points, doing a forage inventory. I think, is that possible? Yes. Does that still have some technical challenges to accurately estimate forage? Oh yeah. But the value would be a photo point. Like,
right.
Okay, give me a picture every Monday morning at noon on this spot. Give me a 360 panorama.
Yep.
Like, okay, that could be pretty useful.
Well, you're going to get that. You're actually going to get that data point every time at whatever time it goes by. That you're going to get that.
Yeah, I get that, but I'm saying like
at every place all the time.
We can get that to displace off the feed ground to go be somewhere and take a picture at a specific photo point at a time during the day.
All the time.
Yeah.
Like that's what you just like link it up. But yeah, go ahead.
So speaking of feed grounds,
okay,
you program this thing to feed wherever you want it to.
Right.
Can you change that to where it feeds in a different spot every day and move your nutrients around and your impact around where you're improving the soil by where you're feeding?
So I'll put it this way. You have missions, which are routes and times assigned to those routes. And so you can have as many missions with as many different routes with as many different times as you want.
I think that's huge, being able to spread that daily feed around.
It's
a net gain instead of a net loss, where you have your one area in the pasture that's just junk because it's so rich it won't grow anything, or mud it up, or whatever you want to call it. Impact.
Yeah. So as far as schedule and routing goes, just whatever your mind can handle on that, which is really that. It's as many routes, as many schedules as you like, and you put those into missions and as many different feed locations and the amount per feed location that you want within each mission.
Yeah,
you can have 1,000 feed missions if your little heart desires it.
Have you put a weather station on your Range Rover yet?
Not yet, but that's a matter of a few sensors in retrospect.
It is just like having a rain gauge out in the pasture.
Yeah, we've thought about like a full like NOAA style weather vane, that takes, measurable rainfall, humidity, has a barometer, wind vane. It's just putting it on. Like River Nice, like we're coming out of a stage where we didn't want to take any outside investment capital at this point in the game. And we wanted to continue to focus on what mattered to us, which is building a vision. We're there now, right? We know exactly where we want to go with this thing. We have a pretty clear idea of how we do that. And now we're ready to kind of shift focus. So my point being that being bootstrapped, we may have conquered a lot of things that we don't necessarily have on the machine to date. But why? Why would we spend, $2,000 or $1,500 on a sensor that is just plug and play and gives you those data points? So, I think another thing that's so exciting about getting in the mode of selling these things and actually like having sales, now we're starting to have real conversations with paying customers about what's really important, right? And like you're saying, like, yeah, we've identified that weather's super important, right? I think we all want to see that information over time. Getting those pictures, that 360 panorama picture of your place, I like to call it kind of asset protection, right? You're just monitoring your asset over time and kind of having these, historical pictures to rely on. And you're painting this cool picture with data, right? So functionally, River and I have really just been focused on making sure this thing runs well in the pasture. And that's the most critical, right? Because we're delivering feed. Adding capabilities beyond that has really been kind of a later stage thing for us. I think important thing was functionality in terms of doing the job of feeding cattle, counting cattle, and add it as we go into the future.
And to go off of something we were talking about at lunch is, who else is, so for like rain collection, like rain gauges, most of the water sensor guys, they have a rain gauge on their system. Mm-hmm. And so if they're already doing that, let's just pull from that, right? So like we're entering with this and everything that we have so far with it. Let's see what else comes up in this situation and see if, there's some other people that are better at doing this one thing. Maybe we just need to partner with them, like Hunter was talking about earlier. Let's let the professionals handle their profession, right? And if it's something that makes more sense that we build it ourselves, more financial sense to our customers, right? If it's better for our customer that we do it, then we'll do it, right? But let's first look, like, let's give it a fair amount of time to understand what else is going on in our ecosystem, and then we'll reevaluate from there.
That's the beauty of the Rover-centric thought process, right? Is that we kind of get to pick our winners and losers based on our values, right? And that's the beautiful thing about capitalism, right? Is that we can actually do what we want to do. And I think that, go ahead.
That's not an interruption. That's just whenever. So to your point about it being a big flatbed with 1K crawling at the time, there's room there. You could put multiple cake boxes on it. So you're giving different groups in the same ranch different feeds for different reasons. You could even do cake box with mineral on it. Like how targeted can you get it to where it can pull up to your mineral feeder, shoot a little bit of mineral in it.
So with the mixture of so that's a good technical thing. So it is GPS RTK. So I mean, just same GPS technology. It's on your tractor within inches of accuracy. And we can hone in that accuracy even more with machine vision. So the machine vision that is on the Rover for the purpose of object detection is not only object detection for obstacle avoidance, but object detection as far as feed bunk, lining up with feed bunks and staying in line with those feed bunks. So let's say the GPS gets us to the feed bunk, and then the machine vision takes over from there, and it stays even more precise than the GPS could. So on that front, yes, there's also some other sensors that you can do in line of that, but machine vision is actually really good.
Yeah, the concept is known as SLAM. It's simultaneous location and mapping, right? So the sensor is learning by taking those measurements and then recording those measurements and then running essentially a regression to find like that average, right? So then it figures out this is what happens if I overcorrect, undercorrect, perfect, and it all happens simultaneously. So it's beautiful, right? What takes us, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of human resources training, the machine's like, okay, that's where you want it to go. All right.
How durable are these things? Like, how resistant to cow damage? Because and I don't know what it is. Like, I can run a feed truck for years and not get a dent in it, and some of my neighbors can destroy one in a half a season. How
we don't have fenders.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing less than 11 gauge steel in the platform and the frame. Frame's actually 3/8.
What about
You got flying cows?
Yeah. How big are your cows? Those must be, yeah. No, I'm kidding.
Someone asked us if they would flip over, and we were just kind of like, man, if that is like kind of an occupational hazard on your place, I don't know if we're the right people. If it's flipping over your feed truck on the daily, and
this thing weighs 8,000. It weighs 8 to 10,000 pounds loaded.
So following the positivity, thinking further out in the future.
Get that mic in front of you, man.
The impact that you have on tires versus tracks. Have you looked at less power to carry more weight if you track it sometime, and then it can take different routes, so you're not having all these 2 tracks all over?
Do you want to pay for it? That's the question, right? Yeah. Like, we can do it mechanically, like putting tracks on the machine. Does that impede our goal of providing a machine to a rancher affordably and, sustainably enough where River and I can foresee the rest of our lives building machines? No, but if you have the money and you have some of those pump jack Angus crosses and you want a tracked machine that doesn't affect your place, we're happy to build it, right? Yeah. I think the key is let's try to like reel it in, and I think always find the weakest link. And for us, it's money. We always run into that with our machine. It's like, it's pretty expensive. The starting price is $55,000. We can finance that in different ways. We can lease a machine. We can work our magic the best we can, but delivering something that's reliable, that far surpasses the quality of your pickup truck in terms of robustness and durability, it's going to cost a little bit of money, right? And, adding bells and whistles, we're happy to talk about customizations, but you have to think we're trying to help family ranchers. And this is expensive technology, and it's expensive to build a truck-sized thing in the United States, right? This isn't made in China. And I think once people kind of see that, and then they can start to understand that, like, yeah, it has all these basic features. I want more out of it. Well, you can get more, but we're just trying to low-hanging fruit, guys. Let's make it the lowest hurdle possible, so that way the lower end of the spectrum can see, hey, it's not that hard to imagine spending $10,000 a year on a machine like this.
Yeah. I didn't grow up having cows. I didn't go through FFA. I've never heard of a pump jack Angus cross. What kind of a breed is a pump jack?
So, about, let's say 35 million years ago during the Permian era. No, I'm just kidding. Fortunately, the pump jack Angus cross, for some ranchers, that's just having their mineral rights, their oil and gas production, paid royalties. It can come in the form of quarries, timber. All over America, ranchers are extracting value from their property through the natural resources. And I just like to call them pump jack Angus crosses because where I'm from, the natural resource is oil.
Yeah. Hey. They might, and some of those guys probably pay for a track machine.
Yeah, maybe with some subwoofers.
I will happily build whatever that is.
I'm in the context to where everybody's so high on it on tractors because your compaction, but they also wanted it being a slow moving vehicle. How much trouble you're going to get into with mud and go into bogs trying to feed different spots where you could maintain a slow movement with.
Yeah, we spoke to an Argentinian that brought this up in a real interesting way. So in the Pampas region of Argentina, I guess the rainy season can sometimes cause pastures to have, up to 12 inches of standing water. And that's pretty impressive. But as River and I said, at this point, we're going to have to build something amphibious. If we're going, if we're like,
Well, if there's 12 inches of standing water in there, are they even grazing cows?
So
They wanted
apparently
to
there's
look at
to get to places, it was something like that. They still got to drive through it apparently. But
yeah, it's up in the mountains and the valleys, right? So you have these wide, expansive valleys that are essentially catch basin type bowls. And, to go up to the mesas where the cattle are at in the dry land, they have to go through these bogs. And so
with like oversized
huge
lifted
tire. Yeah, it's kind of nuts.
piece of equipment. So but to go back on that, it's
As dry as it is, I'm just having a hard time thinking about 12 inches of water.
what's
Things
that?
change.
Yeah,
Hey, that's just a 2-inch rain here, right? I think the ground's so dry around these parts that, if it did rain, it would probably just stand around.
Like two sagebrush plants fight over coyote pee. It's so dry.
But yeah, I think different demographics and different situations are going to call for different builds. But let's first get out the one that satisfies most, and then let's start building some models directly to that. I'd also say if you can't get through it with your pickup, what do you think we're are we like that? We're not the magic school bus over here that just so happened to build a piece of technology that can also fly. I mean, like if your pickup can't make it through it, then the Rover is probably going to sit that day. But we'll do our damnedest in future models to go ahead and get through some of that other stuff too whenever it comes that time.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just funny, right? Like, I mean, dealing with people and dealing with innovation, you see it, right? It's like they just want to cut it down. And I think that it's not been very helpful. What has been helpful for us is to not expose our weaknesses because we know about them, right? It's very obvious in front of us. Like, let's solve those gate problems. Let's solve these problems together. Let's think about the methodology. River and I are trying to do this, right? And it's like your coyote thing. If we want to do that, I encourage everyone to email us pictures of coyotes, right? Send us coyote pictures and we'll make that happen, right? So please don't do that.
When we saw that one this morning, a camera was not the first tool I was going to reach for. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a different. That's a very different.
Now we have talked about some opportunities in that space with some Rover with some guns, but I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
That's not a road that I think anybody, even in ag, needs to consider going down. Is putting a weapon on an autonomous platform.
I don't think. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
They make movies about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, could we put a dart gun on it? That's where my head goes. I'm like, all right, well, now could we put a dart gun on it? Like,
Yeah, that's called a rabbit hole, and maybe we'll go down that rabbit hole
another time.
a much later time.
Kidding.
Yeah. But it would be kind of cool though.
But those
Just
are
a
the
taser. Don't put it just taser. Put a taser on it.
Yeah,
That'd be fun. Like tase a coyote, and then it's still like they're attached with the wires of the taser. You just set it like I'm gonna zap that sucker every 5 minutes and watch him twitch.
So yeah, predation. That was like the best way to put it. Like simply, how to do this, right? Say make it spot coyotes, and we'll say, well, it's going to cost you money, or it's as simple as just doing it, right? And I think that as ranchers and as a community are centered around beef production, we need to do a better job of working together. I think it's really easy to get in these pissing matches of who's better and whose practice is better. But and a lot of times regenerative ag is regressive ag in terms of people's attitudes. And I see that when I go to conferences and I talk to people about what we're doing at Smooth Ag, it's a strong dichotomy of black and white in our space. And that, Yellowstone hardcore mentality, that's killing us. That is why our steaks and our beef are coming from other places in the world, because we want to take this approach where we can't work together to solve problems together, and we're competing over a commodity. It's ridiculous.
I can't say I'm exactly following you because I don't watch Yellowstone. I mean, I know what it is. Obviously, I'm not that far out of touch, but I don't watch it because I'm not into that kind of TV. And some of the things I've heard other people say, like,
I've
watch
never
it and
seen
there's
an
like
episode.
35 guys and there's 60 cows. Like it's pretty bad if you're watching it from that
and
point of view.
he's alluding to like the gatekeeping that comes on with that too.
Yeah,
the attitude.
You have
of-
Coca-Cola cowboys acting like they're top hands, cool hand Lukes, and that's just not the case. I think what we see is the hardest of them all. They're the least noticeable. So
Yellowstone, I think, has also done good things for the beef industry, for the cattle industry as a whole. You know, it's a platform. Like I've seen some quotes that they've said. Like there was one rant that Kevin Costner did, or somebody did about this is why we do beef, or this is why we do it the way we do it. We have to compete against all these foreign imports that aren't labeled. I believe that that platform is doing a good job of helping spread a message of some of the things that we're dealing with out here every day, some of the things we're fighting against, imports, corporate monopolization, consolidation, lack of competition. Like, yeah, it's hard. We can sit around this table and we understand what we're talking about, right?
right.
But let's go grab the next person that comes down the sidewalk out there and pull them in and try to tell them and try to talk to them about the beef system or the chicken or the pork or where it comes from and how it's fed and how it's raised. Like we're going to have to spend so much time just figuring out what that person knows and what biases they already have come with to find the entry point to where we can start unpacking those biases and correcting them. Right? It's such an uphill battle. And I think, a good part about a program like Yellowstone, okay, they're not the most accurate representation of ranching lifestyle. They're not the most accurate representation of Montana. Okay.
Yeah.
What are we looking at? Are we looking at 75, 80%? Okay. It's a mass market message. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Taylor Sheridan does not make the program Yellowstone for guys like us.
Right.
Like we're not his target demographic for that show.
And I think that's my thing about that. What I guess he put it pretty well. Is like it's the gatekeeping because of the popularity and because of the newfound attention that the Western lifestyle has received. Some of the more respected or the more wise in terms of experiences and understanding about this industry have kind of shut themselves down because they don't want to let all these new people in. And I think it's more of a gatekeeping issue. Less than Yellowstone has made a negative impact. Our response to people becoming interested in the lifestyle and the industry has caused us to act like a turtle and put ourselves in a shell.
when we should be embracing it.
Yes.
And using all the new mines and the new
Money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And instead, though, I think we have a tendency to
Because
dwell.
you can fight anything, but you don't want to fight progression.
No.
And I think what we have a tendency to do is we have a tendency to push back or fight against, quote, the new people. Mm-hmm. Or the guys that just bought that ranch down the road that paid twice what we think it's worth.
Yep.
And, you know, I totally get what you're saying, Brendon, about gatekeeping. And I'll also say this. So, you'll know who I'm talking about. The neighbor that bought the ranch next to me in 2008. You know what I'm talking about? I still feel like they're new people in the neighborhood. They've been here since 2008. They've been here now for 15 years. And to me, they're still new people. It's like
generational.
Like they're just like somewhere in my mind, they've been here for 15 years. They've had kids here. Like to me, I still have this mental thing that they're temporary because almost everybody else that has been on that ranch, I've watched that ranch turn 4 times. Like they're the 4th people to own it since I've been on the planet, and they've had it for 15 years. Okay, maybe they'll stick around and make a go out of it. I'm starting to think that they're not so temporary in my world, but you get what I'm saying. Like, so down around Decatur, which is, I believe, northwest of Fort Worth. I've got a friend from down there. Richard, if you're still a podcast fan, this is actually you. So we went down to Fort Worth for grass-fed exchange. I met Richard, toured some of the property he has leased. And between Decatur and Fort Worth, it's like all solid town. Mm-hmm. It's just housing developments and housing developments and housing developments. And Richard was telling us about, how much land cost had gone up and what the competition was like to try to get land. And some of the stuff that's been in production or been leased for a long time, he couldn't get it. But some of the stuff that somebody had just moved out from Dallas that bought a ranch house with 3 acres out in the country. He would go pick up a lot of those little 3-acre patches. Maybe some he'd hay. Maybe some he'd put sheep on. But you'll find opportunities like that from people that maybe have, maybe the Yellowstone type generation that's moved out of the cities because they want a ranch and just don't know how. Maybe that's creating opportunities for a lot of young people that don't necessarily have financial resources or any equity to draw on or any family in the business. Then you go to somebody like that and be like, hey, you want to live your best Yellowstone life? Let me be your ranch hand.
Yep. And I think that just being open to allowing new people in, it's so important. My dad made me work on a dude ranch one summer, which when I was 16 years old was not at all what I wanted to do.
That'll turn you off of customer service for your whole life.
Yeah. And I thought I was so much of a top hand that I could never be spotted on a dude ranch. But honestly, it was such a humbling experience. Honestly, people from all over the world were coming to this place because they just wanted a piece of what I thought was this normal day-to-day life, and they would give up everything they had to live like we do. And I think bringing those people in and the ideas that they have, my, I guess 3 or 4 greats of a grandpa was a banker in Paris in the late 1800s. He wasn't a ranch hand. So who am I to keep any spots, right? We didn't start out as ag people, even though it may feel like it has been. We all started from zero.
Yeah.
I think something else and we might just get off get off this subject a little bit, but also kind of is in the same realm is, so with Smooth Ag, we have this opportunity to be a bridge between that kind of urban reality and that rural reality, right? And especially because, like I was talking about with Hunter earlier, and I don't know the exact number, but it's probably 90-95% of ag tech companies are founded by people who did not grow up in agriculture. So a lot of those tech companies right off the bat, and just tech in general, your agriculture people are kind of weary of, right? Because of that. And what's neat about us is that me and Hunter did grow up in agriculture. It's actually us. It's us kind of venturing into the tech landscape. We're kind of the outsider to the tech side. And because tech is so binary, I think we have a better chance of success in that space than if somebody from the tech side was going to try to come to this kind of non-binary, the more fluid industry, right? So
they'd get gate kept, right? Because they would pull up in
I'm not
Prius.
Not even to me. It's not even about. Yeah, I get that, but to me, it's not even about gatekeeping because it's that's there, right? But there's gatekeeping into the tech industry as well. We know we've talked to VCs. We've been mocked a few times in some interviews. So I get it. It's on both sides, right? And that's why I'm talking about this bridge. But but coming to ag, now that's a whole nother thing. All right. Yes, I can learn a lot of tech. I can learn more tech for less cost via YouTube. Okay. Hate to break it to them. That's just true. All right. I can my cost of failure learning tech is nothing compared to the cost of failure learning ag.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, for sure.
So whenever you kind of are, so now we sit in this really unique opportunity that we are in ag and we're moving over and we're learning from the tech side. We're going to be able to learn at that level and be able to get through that. And you really do serve as a societal bridge there. It's look, guys, it's tech's really not all that bad, right? And hey, look, tech, rural isn't really that bad. And also this is how they both work because I don't know a freaking rancher that doesn't have an iPhone. Mm-hmm. And I don't know one that doesn't use Google that probably saves them 2 to 3 hours a day on average.
Totally different story from 5 years ago.
Yeah, right. But still, that's my point. It's only going to get better. So you got rural people that cuss these people over here, right? But guess what? Those people are needed. And you got these people over here cussing these people, but they're needed because you can pull over here to In-N-Out and pick up 1,200 calories, right, in a matter of minutes. And it's all because your rural space is taking care of that. And then you can pick up your phone, right, and learn something in a matter of minutes. And it's all because of these people over here. And neither one of those things, if you think tech is easy, I'll be the first one to tell you it's not. It takes a lot to make what is in your pocket right now. And it also takes a lot to get that damn cheeseburger in through the drive-through window. And there's no bridge there. There's hardly any bridges right now in that aspect. There's nobody like everybody's just on one side or the other, whether it be through gatekeeping or lack of education of what each other. Education of what each side does, and there's nobody in the middle to kind of facilitate that. And you can't force that. That's not something you can force.
Well, I think the issue is it comes down to more than what we do for a living. That now we're getting into that, like the occupations are a good indicator of political leanings, etc. And I think it's really important to recognize that. I think the jump from them to us is so hard because it's so hard to understand who we are culturally. And on the other side of things, it's so easy for us to understand why those people think the way they do coming from where they come from. So that's probably the biggest thing, right? It's not so much about knowing the industry as it is like understanding why people are the way they are. And like when you come out here, it's hard if you're a city person, it is hard to understand why in the earth you would want to live in Sun City, Kansas. Like that is asinine to a city person, right?
We have no DoorDash. It takes Amazon Prime at least a week. UPS second day is 3.
Right, but then you go to the city and you're like, damn, Amazon's here the same day. I can get anything I want to eat. I can go shop anywhere I want to shop, buy whatever I want to buy. So it's really easy for us to put ourselves in their shoes. Like, hell yeah, I want to live in the city. Until you hear about the crime and the other statistics. So I'll stay in my small town. But, I think that's really the thing for me, River. Like it's so easy to put myself in their shoes.
Mm-hmm. We're talking about a rural urban divide, and, there's a money aspect. And, when we have a lot of people coming from the coasts, which, we've started seeing it the last 3 years, or not started seeing it. It should be obvious to anybody that's been paying attention for the last 3 years that there's a lot of people from the East Coast and there's a lot of people from the West Coast that are moving to the middle of the country. Most of them are going to Texas, which that's fine. Y'all can have them. That's great. They're going to turn the place purple. Okay. By the time Kansas goes purple, I'll just go hop across and we'll meet you guys in Oklahoma. It'll probably be the last red state in the country. But that's going to keep happening, right? That's inevitable. And I think what happens more as we see the urbanites move out to the rural areas and, and just start take over, infect us with their liberal ideology or just want to get off the coast, whatever their motivation is, okay? We just mentioned some of the things that we don't have in Sun City or here in Pratt or in Medicine Lodge that they would have in a bigger area or a more populous area, or even a similar sized community, but further east where the population density is higher. Okay. We don't have those here. So when we go to Wichita or Kansas City or go somewhere on vacation and I could actually use Uber Eats and DoorDash, that's cool for me. Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. But then again, you've also heard me on a podcast say, shake the hand that feeds you. And we need to be more worried about building local food systems. And, when I'm home, I try to do that. And even when we're on the road, right? We try to go find the local mom and pop shops, and we try to ask them where'd you get these tomatoes? Where'd you get this cow? And the thing is here that I think people don't understand, we just had a comparison about phones. Okay. Yeah. There's an awful lot that goes into a phone. Is a smartphone more complicated than a cheeseburger? It's a different kind of complexity. Does a cheeseburger still have a lot of parts that goes into the assembly of it? Yes. Is it a lower skill assembly? Sure. But we're still talking about two things that have to be assembled from components. Bear with me here. Okay. Now, we like to talk about food. We want our food cheap. Okay. Everybody used to love the dollar menu at McDonald's, $5 footlongs. Love them. I mean, that's a beauty of the industrial ag model and commodity ag, right? We can feed everybody for pennies on the dollar. Well, we also have these cheap phones. And like we've heard about, people that have been paying attention to what's going on in the world for the last 3 years. We know about cobalt and lithium mining in Africa.
Yeah.
Right. We know how bad that is. We know that there are little kids mining cobalt in the Congo for our phones. Right. We know that. We know that there are nets around the iPhone factory in China because people will throw themselves off the roof of the building so they don't have to go to work and build iPhones anymore. Let's not kid ourselves. Okay. A lot of these systems that we're relying on are run on externalized cost and exploited labor. Cheap food and cheap phones are just two examples of that. And as we have more of this urban exodus, okay, I think these people that have had it too good for too long living in the cities on artificially inflated means, just absurd excesses of wealth, they come out to these areas and the services aren't quite what they're used to. And maybe they have to work a little harder for their food. And maybe they actually have to go meet the person that's growing their food. What I'm saying is like we're going to start over the next near future, we're going to start realizing what the value of that exploited labor and those externalized costs are in these big production systems, right? And I know we've had some conversation earlier today when we were driving around, and at lunch we talked about the CAFO model and how much fuel and energy and resources it uses to keep that model up. Like just in the transportation of feedstuffs and what it takes to grow the corn, the soy, and pump the water, right? There's a lot of externalized costs there. And it's not just externalized financial cost because, those production systems are pretty much only held up by government subsidy, price supports, commodity and insurance, whatever. Similar to that, those are externalized costs. And we can't have cheap food, just like we can't have cheap phones without exploited labor.
Right.
And what I'm talking about is like labor in the big packing plants. I'm not talking about, our small local mom and pop slaughter plants or the guys that, run on 20 people. I'm talking the big plants that are just an hour and a half west of here out in Dodge City.
Right.
They're all down the panhandle. We've got, Somalia immigrants and Southeast Asian immigrants manning these plants, working 12-hour shifts. And it's really disturbing. Like this has been over the news for the last couple of months. JBS hires a company. Like they have a subcontractor to come in and clean their plants.
Children.
Their subcontractor was using 14-year-olds.
Children.
That's in this country, folks. That's in the United States of America. We had 14-year-olds cleaning meat plants.
Is it really something that, we can do through regulation? No, right? Regulation's not the answer. They'll export the travesties to another country that's willing to accept it. We have to take a stand, right? Like you were saying about mandatory EID. If we don't figure out some way to separate ourselves from just another steak,
they'll ram it down our throats.
They're just going to allow JBS, who is also using this very similar technology in terms of artificial intelligence as us. In fact, the exact same. So what do you think they want? They want to do it as cheaply. They want to destroy communities. It's very clear what they've done. They've taken out the trade of being a butcher. They used to be a skilled trade. They have now turned that and flipped that into something that can be done on an assembly line, and just wait till a robot cuts meat. Done. See ya. No more jobs. And then what happens to 3,000 displaced Somali immigrants that are now in Dodge City, Kansas, looking for work?
Well, and it's not just going to be the beef plants. It's going to be the pork plants. It's going to be the chicken plants. They've got to be building the technology.
So what's the solution?
The solution, the solution to me is to decentralize, which that doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
the solution is to not play that game. The solution,
okay, but
the solution is local food networks and local food.
But
communities.
we can only get as local as the outskirts of the of heavily densified populations.
Yeah, I mean it's
so we will continue to have an industrial process until you break up the heavily populated areas.
I agree.
And this is a Will Harris thing. Will Harris is like, well, why does 9 million people need to live in the same spot? Well, I don't know Will Harris, but they're not going to stop doing it.
Exactly. Like you're not going to get everybody to move out of Southern California. The weather is just too nice.
Yeah. So and honestly, those as many people are moving to rural areas, it's actually more people are still moving to populated areas, and the population in those areas are continuing to grow. I think it's 15%. There's LA is estimated to grow 15% by like 2035, maybe 2050. But anyways, my point is that populated areas aren't going anywhere. And they'll continue to only get bigger. And so your demand for an industrial process is going to remain. Now we can combat some of these things by improving our systems on the front end or on the back end, at the base, the foundation, growers and producers. If we improve systems, we can make an impact on that to a degree, right? And you can get more direct to consumer. So if those plants if we have higher gains and higher quality, then that means that those plants don't have to produce as much and they don't need as many people in theory, right? In theory, they'll need more than they do today, but per capita, right? So I like the conversation, and I don't like it either. Like solar panels is something off subject, but like solar panels are built by like slave labor. Okay, like I hate that. I don't like the fact, but your shoes are also. I mean, like first world countries are built off the backs of third world. All right, always, and you can even do that internally in the country. I would say that rural America, like your food is so cheap because there's a guy that's willing to live on $30,000 a year. Okay, well maybe he gets paid enough to pay his bills, but also live in the middle of nowhere. Also be the most prone to suicide. Also, so all these negatives that so externalized costs I like to call them hidden costs instead of externalized costs because people are like, where's this external coming from? Where's it coming from? No, it's a hidden cost. It's something you don't think about, right? And so yeah, there are these these things that we need to address, but it's like, yeah, we're screaming about it. It's like, all right, well, let's figure out what we can start doing about it, right? And because we know that some of these things are just going to happen. They are inevitable.
Yeah.
To a certain area, to a certain point, they're inevitable, and they're only going to get more demanded of these processes.
That's fair. I suppose that's fair.
Yeah, I'd love to live in a little house on the prairie world where that we could all homestead and sustainably live. But I also like laser tag and go to the movies.
You have to have worked everybody to still be doing it.
Yeah. So
that's how this all started, was with 40-acre homestead.
Yeah.
Right. So if we go back there, what does that look like? It looks completely different. I think, yeah, like River said, the data is pretty clear that we're going to keep kind of doing things the same way we're doing them. But young people have proven to care somewhat about quality, and which in turn allows American beef producers to get that opportunity to shine again. We have a genetic pool of cattle in the U.S. We have these conditions environmentally and all over the country where we can produce top-notch cattle, and they're right here at home. Yes, we have demand in the UK and in China and Southeast Asia. We're happy to sell them high-quality beef. But we can do that here at home where people are now starting to get a true taste. I think inflation has allowed us kind of one luxury as people started equalizing. The McDonald's cheeseburger is just as much as a good quality cheeseburger that you can pick up at the grocery store. So now I'd rather go with the better tasting meat. And you see it on TikTok, Facebook, everywhere. People, they want to know where their food comes from, and they want to know it's good, like high quality, very tasty, palatable meat. And we can do that in America really well and cheaper than anyone else in the world because it's high-end beef. It doesn't need to travel so far. So I think that in terms of like the resistance of like what's going to happen to Central U.S. is we're going to do a better job or we're going to get kicked out. Brazilians can make cheap, low-quality McDonald's meat or institutional meat, whatever you want to call it. And American producers can produce something of quality that globally is demanded. And I think other places around the world, they can get really caught up on the climate and they can cut beef out of their, GDP. That's not going to happen in the U.S. It's state by state. We're not going to see this climate 2030, no cows in the U.S. That will not fly in most of our states. Maybe some states will try. Good luck convincing people to not have a pot roast or a ribeye steak. You're not going to do that. It's easy to say.
Yeah.
But they want us to eat if they want us to eat meat, they want it to either be grown from bugs or grown in a lab from plants. I feel like this whole, yes, there's certain beef diets that aren't that great. There's ways that you can raise beef that are less or more environmentally responsible. There are ways you can grow fruit trees and edible plants in more or less environmentally responsible ways. But for the environmentalists to think that we're going to not eat cows anymore or sheep or goats or chickens or fish, and that everybody's going to go eat plant-based food and we're all going to survive and be happy, I think they have a very short-sighted understanding of how much land, chemicals, and fuel it would take to grow enough plant-based food.
Well, those are the same people that poop on the streets. So just to be very clear that here in Pratt, Kansas, there is no poop on the streets. But if we go to San Francisco, we will in fact find shit on the streets. So I just maybe wanted to point that out to your listeners that the people that are preaching all this eat bugs, they shit on the streets. So I don't know if we should really listen to them or not.
Well, and I'm also curious as to really how many of those people there are.
I think they're a very, very vocal,
right,
extreme minority.
Liberty for me and not for thee, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
like,
really easy to eat filet
really-
mignon and tell you.
Squeaky
voice.
wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this squeaky wheel is going to get the grease.
No, they've been around
Thanks-
forever.
And honestly, thanks to your beef monopolies. Honestly, your beef monopolies are probably what is going to keep beef around.
They're the ones paying the politicians.
That's right.
to Make the rules.
Yeah, I would say that's your biggest push. It's like a necessary evil. I mean, that's your biggest pushback is those guys are not going to
Concentrated money.
Yeah, they're not going to not get paid. They're not going to let laws. It's way too much. It's the third. What is it? What was beef number 3?
In all cash receipts, it's number 1.
Oh, number 1. Yeah, in all
US.
cash receipts.
Really?
That's a lot of money on the table to just let, to not like lobby. There's some other things going to go
It's crazy,
first.
actually, to think that, like, because River and I were under the assumption that it was corn or wheat or,
It's like 140
soy.
billion or something like that.
Yeah,
huh?
but in all cash receipts, cattle is the largest business, and you wonder why though. It's all the byproducts, right? Like it's easy to think about the combo box that comes from IBP, but honestly, there's so much value add in a carcass that corn can't compete in terms of use case and functionality. There's an old picture, I think maybe from the 40s, like during World War II rationing era, like how many products come from a cow. And they have it broken down essentially into like categories of industry, right? Like everything you can do with the hide, the hooves, the horns, and the bones, and everything you can do with the blood, right? And you start to look at it, that's a pretty useful commodity. No wonder the Plains Indians were able to build, the Comanche Moon Society on the backs of bison, right? Bovine are pretty good at taking care of us, right? Much better than a plant that grows here in Kansas only a few months out of the year, right? And pretty much all over the U.S. and the world. It's not easy to grow plants. Like there were very limited places. Florida, if we all lived in Florida, we could all live on our 40-acre homestead, right? Like that, yeah. Where it rains consistently. Yeah.
There's not 40 acres left there's not 40 acres left in Florida, but
Right.
no, there is, but it's like it's something really simple. Jell-O.
Yeah.
What's Jell-O made out of?
Hooves.
Hooves.
Yep.
You know what the gel in your bicycle seat is made out of?
Hooves.
Hooves. Your
Like
gel
capsule-
night. Yeah.
Gel capsules.
Hooves.
Hooves.
See,
We talked about the climate earlier, right? Like about carbon sequestration. I love I love to go the uber hippie liberal route with this because it's so fun to just continuously throw it back at them in terms of, let's look at farts and burps. Regardless of how you think about them, the carbon cycle, the water cycle, cows produce no net carbon. It is cyclically throughout its life, it will take down with it what it's taken up, and vice versa. So we look at, if we're going to grow soybeans to have Beyond Burgers, and that's our future, well, we're going to have to continue to extract oil. We're going to continue to strip mine. We're going to, but let's just look at the carbon inputs of the plants themselves. Let's not talk about how they got planted or how they're going to get harvested or anything that it takes to make it. Let's just talk about the plants in the ground in Kansas. Oh, the irrigation pump. What do you think that runs on? Burned carbon.
Yep.
Fresh carbon, not living carbon. Burned up. So all I'm saying is if we really cared, we'd really like sit and look. It's just so easy to sit from like these, ivory towers in New York City and San Francisco and say, this is what everyone else should be doing. Getting it done effectively, if it was possible, they would have already done it.
Yeah, we were talking about carbon sequestration, and I made the comment earlier: it's no use hitting a bullseye if you're aiming at the wrong target.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, it is important to pull carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and sequester it in the ground. Okay. That's literally what a cow does. Like a cow eats grass, the grass plant regrows, puts down more root mass, and stores more carbon under the soil. Like that's literally the cycle. Okay, and that's how it should work. And how it has worked in North America for thousands of years is ruminant animals eat grass, they poop their waste, the grass grows and sequesters carbon in the soil. The end, right? And we've got these outfits, like it's madness. Those of you listened a couple weeks ago to Paul Brown, the episode I did with Paul Brown. Okay, so they have a pipeline that's going to come across their ranch. Mm-hmm. And it's like a 24-inch diameter pipeline, okay? And they're going to pipe, get this, they're going to collect the CO2 emissions from ethanol plants in Iowa, and then they're going to pipe that CO2 to western North Dakota and inject it 5,000 feet below the ground. Okay, couple problems with that. Number one, we're going to transport all of that carbon dioxide that far and inject it. That's how many miles of how much steel pipe that takes how much energy to put in the ground. Mm-hmm. And then let's go look at the source of where we're getting that from. Okay, we're going to grow corn and soybeans to take to an ethanol plant to heat up with electricity to make alcohol out of. And then we're going to take some of that byproduct and put it in a pipeline and pipe it 1,000 miles away to re-inject it in the ground. Like that, no part of that system works.
It sounds like a jobs program, right?
Well, no part of it works if you take away the government's subsidy.
Yeah.
If you take away even one of the government's subsidies, the whole scheme falls apart. And it's one of those things that this is a government program that's given somebody a bullseye to aim at, but it's the wrong target because all they're wanting to do is just take carbon dioxide and stuff it in a rock formation a mile deep. That is not the same thing as my cows eating big blue stem grass and those 6-foot deep roots on the big blue stem sequestering 2 tons of carbon an acre.
Well, it's Orwellian. It's a logical farce, right? Like at the end of the day, it's do as I say, not as I do. And to understand the angle, what is it? It is an opportunity for political parties to divide us. And I think we can't get caught up on these illogical things that happen around us because you can look at what the government spends its money on and you'll have a heart attack. We have it. That is another episode, right? How do we solve that problem? I don't think we in this room can do that. I think we just need to build robots and raise cattle and do what we can because if you look around, there are a lot of people that are going to do illogical things. It's us. It starts at home. And when people see you living the way you live and you can have a good example to lead by, you can impact change, right? I think that it's so easy to get caught up in looking at those type of scenarios like the ethanol plant and say, what in the hell are we doing? It's just a distraction, right?
Yeah. And
someone thought that was a good idea.
Somebody's making a lot of money.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the thing. Somebody's making a lot of money, and they're giving a lot of money to their lobbyists.
Yeah. In that aspect, it is a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, building a pipeline that's good jobs for people and the right of way, right? Like, I mean, whatever greases the wheels, right? I think if we can't get too caught up on these job programs, I mean, thank God they have people that can put the pipe in the ground, because if you ask my grandparents, they don't think anybody wants to work at all. So that's at least they can do stuff still.
Yeah. Yeah. But like Hunter said, come back to like the robot is like improve systems. Right. That's how we can show maybe, all right, maybe we don't need to show it. We shouldn't have to show as our population, right? Like the rural community and agriculturalists, like we shouldn't have to show. I understand that, but we can just show some more though, by improving systems, by adapting new things, by showing the outside world or the urban world or whatever you want to call them, that, hey, no, we are changing. We are smart. And I think that's the biggest thing right there is that right there. Because I think most people see rural America as dumb.
Yeah.
And uneducated.
We were at South by Southwest.
Oh, yeah, we were
that
there.
Was the running theme. Like, we're all so stupid.
Yeah, we're dumb.
What's South by Southwest? Big tech conference?
Yeah, arts, tech, and entertainment.
Yeah.
So like TV, music,
and
business.
My point is, it's like, we are now in a time where we can affordably do things and take the actions that show that, hey, we're smart too.
Yeah.
This is our time too. Like you don't have leverage over me because we can do it too. Right.
I don't know. Some of the smartest guys I know, like one of the smartest guys I know will actually go back past his place on the way back to the ranch.
Mm-hmm.
He farms a couple 100 acres. He also builds rockets in his basement that fly to 20,000 feet and do multi-stage things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you meet this guy at the beer joint and you're like, it's just another old farmer. But then you go find him at a weekend at a rocket fly, totally different guy. And he's in his element, and like he's rattling off, specific impulse and thrust curves and pressure ratios. And I'm just like, I thought you were just a farmer, man.
Yeah, that I think that speaks on something. I don't think people understand just how multidisciplinary skilled agriculture people are. Because you literally grow up, come out of the womb in a problem-solving environment. There is no margin for outsourcing your mechanical problems or any of your problems, really. It's all about figuring it out, right? Like you have to work on your own equipment. If you want to be profitable, you have to work on your own equipment. You have to problem solve. And so to think that these people can't think with foresight and vision is ridiculous. And maybe it's just hard to see that because we're not taking some actions that we need to go ahead and be taking to, and it's not necessarily just to show it, especially if those actions result in better returns. We can do, knock out two birds with one stone from a societal aspect, or from a presentation to the rest of the world and to ourselves and our operations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it really is important to be reflective like that, though, River. I think that is how we are going to grow as people, as individuals, as communities, right? I look at Pratt and I'm honestly really impressed. Like, it's always so good to come into like a small town and see that people haven't given up on it, because the only people that keep these small towns and these rural places alive are the people around, right? So the only reason Pratt might be on the list of options for somebody from the coast is because we've done a good job of building the community. And honestly, we need those people more than they might need us, right? I mean, if you're selling a $5 million single family home in LA to move out here, imagine what that can do for our economy. You look around and it's really easy to get against the people that have done financially really well, that have helped prop these communities up, like farmers and ranchers. It's really easy to get on them about their money and what they've done. But it just shows you that all it takes is a little bit of impact. Because you go to where I'm from, the money goes to Vegas and Cabo, and it doesn't stay in town, and our town sucks. Our fault though, right? So like, it's just that easy to be this or that, and it just comes down to individual decision making. Somebody somewhere made that decision, and with like the Rover, like why it's so crazy to think that, they scream at us, hey, learn to code. All right, somebody River heard that in rural America and is building something. And I think the inspiration for anybody, regardless of age, like we live out here where it's a test ground. Can't really mess things up in a pasture. It's really hard. So, this is an open market to innovate. You don't have city permit and ordinances to go with. It's an opportunity and a blessing that we have.
You got your dad's shop. Like there's a lot of innovators out there and that don't. There's a lot of people out there that do not have the same opportunities as us. And, it kind of works backwards against what we were saying about, being in the middle of nowhere is kind of also sucks sometimes. But, you can really show the world your value based on what we have out here and what you've grown up with. So, improving systems, the way I do it, my entire point out of all of this is I think we can really impact all the issues that we're talking about right now by improving our systems. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can do that, and whether you do that from the money that you make improving those systems, or from the system that you build that you then sell, the money you make from that, or however it is, or just the presentation that you put on to paint the industry in a better light. Whatever the way, I think if you are always working towards doing a better job at something, right, and being open-minded, right, quit looking for the pitfalls in everything. There's going to be lots of new things, and most of them aren't going to be good. But if you start coming in with an open mind, you're going to see yourself excel at whatever you're doing. Because if you look for the wrong in something right off the bat every time, you're going to find the wrong in something right off the bat every time. And are you going to move forward with it? No. Mm-hmm. You're not.
One of my mentors that I had in the Navy, a gentleman by the name of we'll just call him Senior Chief Rice, because that was his first name, I think, was Senior Chief. Senior Chief Rice always used to tell me, you get what you inspect. And
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, you get what you inspect.
Yep.
If you go looking, you'll find what you're looking for.
Yep.
And if you don't find what you're looking for, keep looking, and it won't take long.
Yep.
So we've got to start moving on out of here. What's on the horizon for Smooth Ag? What are you guys looking forward to in the next 6 months, a year?
Deployment. So we have customers in pipeline. We have customers to deliver to. So you're going to see a lot of really boots hitting the ground now. You're going to see you're going to see machines in action. You're going to see a lot of content on that. Yeah. I think that you're also we're going to enter this period of what is really important to us is building trust and confidence in the product and what we're doing. So, we'll have to be on our A game in that aspect. So I think all in all, a lot of good things, and I think we're going to see things excel very fast from here. I think it's like drones. Whenever drones first came out, it's like, oh yeah, whatever. And then like 5 years later or 8 years later, everybody's got one.
Yeah, now everybody's got them.
Everybody's got one now, right? It's like, okay, that's how fast it moves, right, guys? Like, okay, you're wary about it now, but I'm telling you, as you see, you may be wary about it now, like I said, but then let's give it like 3-4 years. This is the time that you're going to start seeing like that, just every day, just more and more growth and what we call it, like reliability. Yeah. You're going to see a lot more of that. So I think also you're going to see some different equipment start to make the media covers.
Now, you're not just talking about your Range Rover. You're talking about other stuff that has yet to be imagined.
Well, there's some stuff we're going to do. And
It
that
has been imagined.
And that has been imagined, that what you're going to see out of us. But yes, on that point right there, I think you're about to see, like, once this kind of disease, like once it kind of takes off, this disease kind of takes off, I think we're about to see a lot enter this industry. It is the sleepiest industry in ag as far as tech goes right now. And you know how fast they went to cash crops over the last like 5 years. How ag tech has blown up. You didn't even know what ag tech wasn't a word 5 years ago. Basically, you know, it was not thrown around like it is now, and it never even caught on to cattle for some reason. Like, nobody hears about ag tech and cattle, and so I think you're going to see a lot. You're going to see a lot of that hit cattle.
Well, I think I've been hearing, I think, maybe speaking a little bit for Brendon here, but for the last 15 years, I think it's been a struggle for the tech sector to try to adapt or do anything with cattle or with agriculture, because there's so many different kinds of cattle operations. It's so diverse. Like, there's no such thing as a typical cow owner. Mm-hmm. I mean, we talked about that earlier. Typical cow owner owns what, like 42.2 cows. Like, okay, that guy doesn't exist. What is he dressed like? Well, we could probably pick most of them out of a crowd, but not all of them.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to put a metric on. It's hard to put a metric on it. It's not as many bulls that are on the amount of bulls that are on this many stalks within this, on
right,
this many rows.
Or plant population per foot, or pounds of this per acre.
Yep.
It's something that's got more variables that are more loosely defined and more difficult.
It's a harder problem to solve. But I don't think. But if it's there,
I think that's it, though, right? Like, there is an inflection point, like the supply and demand curve, challenges that are worth solving because they're easy to solve, and how much money you can make. And I think the choice has been clearly decided by most people that solve easy problems that make money first, and then we'll come to conclusions. I just think what's crazy is that it wasn't a traditional place. Like River, like he said in his like origin story, it was like, I just want to find one that I can just buy, right? Well, we're not there at all. And so, like, it's clear that we've got a ways to go with cattle, and it's just beginning.
Yeah, it's lots of opportunity in the marketplace, right? Like, there's a lot of opportunity in this industry.
Well,
for innovation.
I'm glad I got to know you guys at the start of your journey. That way, I get to watch you as I get old, and you guys kind of mature your program.
We'll get old too fast.
Running a business will do that.
Yeah.
Especially in agriculture with cyclical drought. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. So.
Yeah. Thanks for having us, though.
Yeah,
this
has
awesome,
been great.
man.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Appreciate
You guys coming up all the way from the Panhandle. It's been an awesome day, and we're kind of wrapping up the podcast, but we still have like almost another hour together driving around. So
that's rural America for you.
Yeah.
I mean,
we had to drive an hour to get to the podcast.
Well, it's not that bad of a drive.
No, it's beautiful.
That's how it is.
Scenic. What do they call it? Gypsum Hills.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to do a little brainstorming in the next 90 seconds and figure out a way to go home that we didn't come up here, so you guys get to see a little bit extra of the country.
Heck yeah.
All right.
They do that.
Well, thank you so much.
You bet. All right, guys. We're going to go ahead and cruise right on out of here. Y'all out there have a great week. See ya.